Right, so what you're looking at here is the M17 HUD head-up display that is a projector unit that projects onto the vehicle windshield. And the information in front of you is the yellow is 1:34, and that's correct. That's 1:30 in the morning, just past midnight. The bar going across is a sort of a representative tachometer, and the zero that you can see down the bottom, which is square, that's kilometres per hour. So we're sitting here doing nothing. There's a little bit of a red dot to the right side of it with a yellow triangle. See if I can move that a bit closer so you can see it. So you can see the light of the projector below, and you can see the light of the projection on the windscreen above it. It has a yellow triangle pointing to the left, and that is technically correct reasonably at this moment. They're not a very accurate compass, but that's the reason for the M17 HUD anyhow. Is there are a number of things I wanted, which was a tachometer alarm for 4,000 RPM. That's when it's seriously generating its torque and its power inside this four-cylinder vehicle. The time is satellite set. You don't just go 1 minute, next minute, because it sets to the time zones that the satellite sends, that it understands and that the unit understands. As for GPS, the GPS speed, well, it is slightly different. It has to be calibrated, because when I'm doing 38 kilometres an hour on my speedometer, this says 40 kilometres an hour, and that's 90% of this device. I drive in the city a large quantity, so it sets off an alarm at 40 kilometres an hour. Right, and then the alarm ceases after it's pipped about 5 or 6 times. The point behind all of that is you don't want to go through school zones nor these local zones, because this road itself, I believe, is 50 kilometres an hour, which is a bit odd, because around the corner and down further it becomes a local zone, and the roads are 40 kilometres an hour, but they have a large number of shops and driveways go in and out onto that particular road down there, so they don't. Yeah, shopping areas are generally 40 kilometres an hour in the city now. The reason for a compass in a city is because the roads do tend to be attempted to be built in a straight line, but never are. So that red dot there with the triangle, it's showing west at this point, but to show northwest, it doesn't point up at an angle. It adds the north triangle up the top and keeps the west one, so that you add the two together, you get northwest in how you read it. Now, the other head-up display units either didn't have a compass, or a compass wasn't workable. One of them was a Bluetooth compass. You had to hook it to the mobile phone and use a map with the compass, which unfortunately either I didn't get it to work without having the Bluetooth, or it doesn't work without the Bluetooth, but it seemed to say in its documentation it didn't work without the Bluetooth. The earliest one of these I had all of the features you have in front of you, except for the tachometer alarm, I think. It had the compass, but the compass wasn't readable. The compass was awfully difficult to spot the dots and the circle that it had. Another one I got, it is really made for a vehicle with a windscreen that's straight up, because it can't perform a projection, and the projector had its own windscreen, and that one I think is called a C4. So it had its own little, it looked like a spectacles case someone keeps a pair of reading glasses in. So it had its own screen on it, but this is direct onto the windscreen of the vehicle. And it's a very nice piece of works because it does ensure that if you bother to listen for the 40 kilometre an hour alarm, because it's very rare to use RPM that reaches 4,000, although I have many times been told by people to not drive like a maniac when I'm doing 30 kilometres an hour. It's only because this vehicle here is a Subaru and has a very high gear ratio, and it's also a 4-cylinder, and they do use their the engine that's inside this car. That model is used as a racing engine, but they trick it up far more inside than they do with a stock engine. But the performance of the engine means that you need to really bring the RPM up, and with any 4-cylinder car, because I remember my dad's car in the 1980s was a 4-cylinder station wagon that was quite small. It's nearly the size of this and only a few hundred kilograms lighter. This is actually a Subaru Outback 4-cylinder. And the trouble was that you can't get a 4-cylinder to move until that RPM goes 2/3 of the way to the redline, because that's where the power band in is, somewhere up between 3,500 to 5,000 RPM. So if you wanted to move in city traffic or up a hill in city traffic, you really need to apply some RPM. This poor old machine here is actually 19 years old now, and it's throwing its little bits and pieces of itself out the door, because I need to do more repairs on it again. Since the day I got the thing, I haven't completely fixed up what I was talking to the guy about. He was nice about one point. He did drop the price, but you couldn't explain to him whatsoever that the vehicle is 19 years old. Well, at the time it was about 17 years old. That it's 17 years old. Anything beyond 15 years, you take huge chunks of it out once a year and throw them in the rubbish bin and replace it with one that hasn't been used as much from a wreckers. You don't really find parts for these things necessarily, except for the more consumable parts like wheel bearings and suspension and such like. But they're only just there now, because once they reach 20 years of age, that gets scant. They don't really support it anymore. So these things are like vehicles that only last about 5 years, so there's possibly only another couple of years where it'll be easy enough to use, and whatever happens after that, once it blows another electronic box, it'll be no good. But back to the head-up display. I nearly continually call this a high unit display, but never mind, that's from computing and other points. So this device here is very useful for not speeding, because there is so much concentration required to be used to not strike at persons or anyone else, and speed is the most common thing to run away and get a fine from in this country, from not so much legitimacy but the very fact that to keep yourself below the speed limit in a city, when you start to get through congestion and dangerous manoeuvres and areas and bits and pieces and children and other things moving around, then it becomes a problem. It really then does require to have something alert you that you're going beyond a point where you really wouldn't want to pick up a fine. So what I'll do is I'll move back here. Yeah, not the greatest of camera systems in here, I'm sorry to say. It is a bit of a rotten camera that I'm using right now. Let's see if we can get anything at all out of this. A very naughty sort of a drive right now, because I need to drive a manual one-handed, but it is 1:30 in the morning, so it's not an impossible sort of an action. focus up here. So you have these roads and these points where people can jump out everywhere. Children, animals, this is a local zone. And I'll just quietly pull over here and end this video because it's not very easy to do this sort of thing. But that's what it's like there. And we're facing what direction? We're facing northeast. It's about right because east is sort of over there. Okay, so that's the M17 HUD.